I am here from Stamen Design. We are a data visualization design studio based here in San Francisco in the Mission District. And I've got some projects to show you that are kind of a mash of a number of the different themes that we've talked about here. There'll be some paper involved, there'll be some artificial intelligence involved, and there'll be some emotional work as well. I really wanted to kind of speak to a group of design people about our practice and some of the ideas that we have about what data visualization can be used for. I think we need a better word than data visualization because nobody can say it, but I haven't figured out what it is yet, but I'm working on it. So we're going to show a few projects. They've got some themes in between them, and I'll try not to speak too quickly. So I want to start off with a project we did with the Dalai Lama. The guy on the left is named Paul Ekman. The guy on the right is the Dalai Lama. He brought the Mickey Mouse ears to the meeting that we had with him to do the work. Paul and the Dalai Lama wrote a book together about emotional awareness. And Paul is one of the world's leading researchers into emotional research, leading researchers into emotions. He wrote books about the relationship of facial expressions to emotions. And he and the Dalai Lama get together and they hang out and talk about emotions. And they learn from each other. And it's been an interesting experience to be involved with their work. We showed the work to the Dalai Lama in Anaheim. Somebody tweeted that asking for design feedback from the Dalai Lama is like asking for spiritual advice from Johnny Ives at Apple. But it was an interesting experience. The Dalai Lama doesn't know how to hold a mouse. And when we tried to get a picture of him working on the project, he said to me, "Technology is for my next body." The source material for this work was the work of Paul Ekman, who has been studying emotions for 60 years. Paul is also 83, is not the most computer literate guy, so rather than kind of a traditional data visualization project where we go in and work with databases and stuff, we basically had to get down to the paper. So I sat with Paul for about a year at his kitchen table drawing an atlas of emotions. When we started the project, I had no idea what that meant, and after about a year, we finally figured it out. But it involved a lot of drawing, it involved a lot of paperwork, and if you start to dig into what an atlas of emotion might mean, you start to find some interesting things. There are, for example, different kinds of actions that come from emotions. There's different emotional states, and I can take you through that. But I just wanted to show you the kind of source material for the project. We got into some pretty specific details about it. And so just jumping right into the project, here's the Atlas of Emotion. The idea that we start with is that there are 5 basic emotions. These are the result of a survey of emotional scientists that Paul came up with. And the 5 emotions that everybody has, according to the survey, are fear, anger, enjoyment, sadness, and disgust. If you don't have these emotions, you're probably not a human being. And then the scary part was that the colors that we picked were the same colors that got picked for the movie Inside Out. And we were nervous for a little while that we were going to get sued by Pixar for copying the colors, but we had came up with the colors before they did, so it didn't happen. But the idea being that emotions are, and I learned so much, it's actually really helped my marriage to do this work, to learn about my emotional states and how they work. So the idea is that in every emotion, you've got a variety of different emotional states, right? And so in anger, there's a number of different states, and they're ranked according to their intensity as you feel them. So on the left-hand side, we've got annoyance, which is only ever just a little bit intense. But once you get past just being a little bit annoyed, it starts to be a different kind of emotional state. So you get frustrated, or you get exasperated that the toothpaste is still on the same. You keep trying to make this thing happen, but it doesn't work. And then each of those emotional states has their own description. So fury is on the right-hand side, and you'll notice that it's very, very tight and very, very spiky at the top. It's because you're only ever very angry when you're furious. Like, you can't just be mildly furious. It just doesn't really work that way. Whereas you can be, everything from mildly frustrated to extremely frustrated. And it's a different kind of emotion. And then there's a whole literature to this that I can't get all the way into. But essentially, the idea that you've got, things like exasperation, which are, a loss of patience. But we can name these emotions as not just being mad or angry or sad, but we can talk about these kind of fine gradations of emotions. And the idea being that you can then apply this kind of metaphor to all the other emotions. So this is fear, which is, ranges from trepidation at the low end to terror and panic. And you also notice that there are 3 emotions inside of fear, as opposed to in anger, that are only ever very intense. And that's terror, horror, and panic. Never just a little panic, right? These are the green piles of poop or disgust. That was fun. You'll notice that there are a lot more emotional states in sadness than there are in disgust. A lot more different kinds of ways to be sad. And then luckily there's also lots of ways to experience enjoyment. Everything from sensory pleasure to ecstasy and lots of things in between. And one of my favorite ones is Schadenfreude, which is the enjoyment of the misfortunes of another human being. Which I felt pretty strongly this morning when I read that Paul Manafort is in jail. Woo! We're working on it. So, actions come out of feeling these emotional states. And I invite you to check the project out at atlasofemotions.com. You can see that anger has a number of those are actions on the bottom. Everything from disputatiousness to quarreling to undermining. Fear, slightly less. And then disgust, there's kind of not that many actions that come out of disgust. You can pretty much just avoid, dehumanize, vomit, or withdraw. And dehumanize is a really powerful aspect of the experience of disgust. It's what motivates things like Holocaust, when you treat another person as though they're a rat, or the way some of the immigration stuff that we see happening in the country right now is being played out. It's important to be able to identify and name these things. And so then we've got sadness over here, which has actions like protesting and withdrawing, and then emotion has a super wide range of states that come out of it. And really the point of the project, and if you go through it, I can attest that this will start to happen to you. The idea is that you start to be able to identify the kind of whole process of becoming triggered, having an emotional experience, identifying the actions that come out of it, and understanding the relationship across time and space. It can be an interesting, powerful thing. So moving on into NASDAQ, which is a much much less squishy, but still interesting emotional journey to go on. NASDAQ asked us to come up with a way of looking at the stock market that wasn't just about lines going up and to the right. And so in this instance, we've got a minute's worth of stock market activity on the NASDAQ exchange. Every one of those dots is a trade. The size is the number of shares that are traded. The color in this instance is the stock, and then the value is from top to bottom. So very low value stuff on the top, very high value stuff on the bottom. And that purple line that you see going across the top there, those tiny little trades, that's NASDAQ just pinging the servers over and over again and saying, is it working, is it working, is it working, is it working. So we can look at this a couple different ways. They're colored by stock, and here they're colored by trader. So you can see that what looks like a highly varied market full of lots of different kinds of trades is in fact dominated by that one player. That's Goldman Sachs. Same kind of thing here. Color is stock. Color is trader. Right? So we've got these kind of actors that we can see when you're visualizing the data differently. It starts to get super interesting when you start to look at some of the more automated behaviors in the market. So that bundle in the middle there is a whole bunch of stocks that are being traded at one stock at a time, and they're being traded from a very specific starting point to a very specific stopping point. And but they're all different kinds. Whereas if we color it by trader, you see that it's all one actor. That's a robot performing a series of automated trades in the stock market. Same kind of thing here. We get these kind of charty bits. In the blue, you can see it's an algorithm. So we're talking about algorithmic trading. We're talking about robots shaking the stock market, and we're talking about data visualization as a way to get at that, to provide a way of understanding that that's not just about analysis, but it's about surprise. So if I take you through the opening bell of the stock market, it'll look something like this. So again, we've got a minute's worth of time, and every time I go forward, I'm going forward about 10 seconds. So there's not much activity happening on the market. There's a few little robots dancing in the beginning. There's somebody's trading at the very low end of the market and the very high end of the market. We're starting to get a kind of beginning of activity. And then about a minute before the stock market opens up, we get this just mass of everybody pinging the servers and saying, is it on, is it on, is it on, is it on? We get this purple and yellow crazy race to the bottom. There's 4 robots in there that are all trading the stock at different prices. And it's almost as though the market draws its breath. And that's the opening bell. That's the first 30 seconds of stock market activity on the NASDAQ. And then there's, we could have a whole conversation about algorithmic trading and distance to the servers. There's server farms that are where the cost of putting your robots in there is determined by the length of time that it takes you to the length of time that it takes you to communicate with the NASDAQ stock exchange. The time makes a difference when you start to talk about algorithmic trading. Nanoseconds. And so this goes on, and then there's a kind of regular drumbeat of activity. The robots start. So that's NASDAQ, and I'm showing these two kind of very different projects. I'm going to show two more to show just kind of what I'm trying to get at with kind of throwing our arms around data visualization. I want to communicate to my friends in the design industry that it's not just about infographics or about communicating clearly, but it's also about emotion and a lot of other kinds of things. But I want there to be as many kind of stories that you can tell with data visualization as you can tell with any of the other media that we're working with. So I want to dive into a mapping project that we put together for the University of Richmond, and it's about the immigration patterns in the United States. And so for every county in the US, you can see by year of the census what percentage of the population was born in another country. Contrary to what some people might be saying now, this has always been a nation of immigrants, and I've got the maps to prove it. So we're looking at Contra Costa County just across the bay. This is pretty similar in San Francisco too. But what you can see is that the majority of the people that were foreign-born in Contra Costa in 1870, the first time there was a census, were from Europe. You can see mostly they're from England, Ireland, and Wales, Scotland. And then the fourth ethnic group is in China, because the Americans were importing lots of Chinese labor to build the railroads and do all this other stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step forward every year, and we'll see some things play out in the pattern. So this is 1870. Here's 1880. You can see China is the second largest ethnic group represented. And again, these are people born in China, living in the United States, and counted in the census. In 1890, there's a bit of a bump for Ireland and Portugal and Germany. China's still way up there. China grows a bit in 1900, and then in 1910, suddenly there are no Chinese people in Contra Costa County, whereas the Europeans continue to grow. We step forward, 1920, still no Chinese people. 1930, still no Chinese people. 1940, still no Chinese people. And who here thinks that all the Chinese people in Contra Costa County just left between 1900 and 1950? So what's going on, right? So we've seen them coming back a little bit in the 1950s, and then in 1960, the Chinese are suddenly one of the more populous ethnic groups, along with Mexico and Germany. China 1980, China 1990, China 2000. So we took a look at the data, tried to figure out what was going on. We thought maybe there was a bug in our code. We thought maybe the data was wrong in some way. We tried to figure it out. And what we learned once we asked the scholars at the Digital Scholarship Lab what happened in between 1900, where there were thousands of Chinese people, and 1910, and we heard about a little act called the Chinese Exclusion Act, which severely restricted immigration from China in 1906. And I knew about that, but what I didn't know about was that the Chinese Exclusion Act also forbade non-white foreigners from being counted in the census. So the gap that you're seeing here is not a gap in the data or a gap in the code or a bug or anything like that, but it's the representation of a racist American immigration policy between 1910 and that was not fully reinstated until 1965, the Voting Rights Act. So what I like about this, I mean, it's a horrible story, but what I like about it is that there's this idea that it's not just what's on the map that's important, but it's also what's not on the map, that holes in the data can be just as valuable as storytelling tools as dates on that. And just to kind of make it interesting, I thought I would talk about watercolor maps. This is a project that I put together because I design a lot of maps, and I got tired of being in a position where the only thing that we could adjust was the color and the line weights, and I wanted to make something where it wasn't really clear what parts have been done by a human being and what parts have been done by hand. So these are maps that are generated by a kind of combination of the textures that you see and then some clever math. and the project maps the whole world. So here's San Francisco. Zooming into San Francisco, you can see the detail gets a little stranger and interestinger, and you start to see these kind of funny overlaps. When my designers were working on this, one of the guys that I was working with said, well, actually take away all those overlaps. And I was like, no, get the overlaps back in, I want to see it. And when we put together this project, we were legitimately getting inquiries from people asking, do you have a factory full of people in China that are drawing these maps, just because at the time that we were requesting them, but it's not true. And this project kind of took away basically my whole brain for the first 6 months that we had it up, because I would just come into work every day and search for Osaka or search for Brasilia. And I just love this idea that the hand came into this digital space. And this is what I share with the previous speaker. I do feel as though there's something that's lost in this digital space. We can make as many visualizations as we want, but if we don't have the hand in there, I'm really trying to come up with a structure that will let us kind of bring a certain life to these visualizations and have them be something that can be a human artifact just like anything else. This idea that maps are these kind of neutral objects that are just stamped out by the hand of God by engineers, it's just not true. So I'm going to end there, and I'll also be around, and I'm happy to chat with anybody about the way that these kind of projects get made and how they get perceived in the world. Thank you very much.